And I also was curious too, because earlier you mentioned the idea that there was progress being made, even if it wasn't made in the intended way. But you gave the example of Bernie Sanders being more open about his, term length for the Supreme Court spots. So, in terms of that, like, what's the like, I guess maybe the pros and cons to shortening the term length of those seats, and then
There
are
is
there.
no term limit. Those are lifetime appointments. So
Right. So if we did implement a term length, what would be the benefit of doing that in terms of getting to that end goal of like this restoration of democracy that we are kind of like working towards? And then are there any other things that are being done in the interim, or other efforts that are kind of spiraling out of this main initiative to get further progress made towards this restoration of democracy?
well, just on term limits, I mean, there are several arguments for term limits, but it's hard to imagine that the founders understood that people would be living to 85, 90 years old. There's
Yeah.
also kind of a capriciousness that goes along with um, having a lifetime tenure for justice who can, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had lived a few more months, then that seat would be, occupied by a progressive justice as opposed to an arch conservative justice. So the idea of kind of regularizing the appointment process, and for example, having 18-year terms where each president gets two per term, two nominees per term, it would be about kind of standardizing the appointment process, instilling some predictability, getting capriciousness out of the system, not having, octogenarians who might be slipping a little. I'm not saying any one justice in particular is slipping, but they can stay on the court now even if
Yeah.
they're slipping. So term limits handles all that. One of the problems with term limits is that and I think term limits are a good idea just for those reasons. But also they're a good idea because any reform to the court, it's kind of like cracking Humpty Dumpty. You got to get the first crack in there, and it's a very, very strong signal to Roberts and Kavanaugh and the other four of them that they better be careful because Congress will take action if they continue to rule in hyperpartisan, frankly crazy ways. The problem, or one of the problems, is that term limit bill would not uh, moderate the courts, would not necessarily moderate the court anytime soon. And our argument is that this 2 year window now, and we might not even have control for 2 years if a Democratic senator dies, if Joe Manchin switches parties. But so this narrow window now may be the last time that Democrats have power for a very, very, very long time, because it's going to become it is already all but impossible for Democrats to win the Senate. And it's just going to become harder and harder and harder for Democrats to win the Senate because of demographic shifts in the country. And so, if a term limit bill is not going to have a moderating impact on the court for quite a while, but this is the moment when you need the court to do things like uphold HR 1, uphold a climate bill, uphold expanded healthcare access, uphold, a law to address systemic racism, then term limits don't deliver a court that will do all that. And also term limits don't rebalance the court after its theft. So there's no political penalty for the norm breaking that Mitch McConnell engaged in to steal the court.
Got it. And then is there anything else that kind of, obviously I guess really what is being looked at is we need solutions in this 2 year window, like you're saying, that can help address some of these issues when they may be, most opportune.
I think so. I mean, there's really no time left on the climate change clock, on the climate clock.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that waiting is a great idea.
Yeah. Is there anything else out there that like initiatives that are being pushed that would help get to the same, the restoration of democracy might be like a too broad of a term, but I don't know, obviously there's, other than the work that you're doing, there may not be any other
The,
real legal mechanisms to get into the like to
Yeah,
rebalance it?
yeah. I mean, there are a range of judicial reform alternatives, and in fact, just this past week we had a conference at Yale Law School about different options for reforming the Supreme Court, and a video of those deliberations will be posted soon in the next week or two. But one idea that is popular among some scholars is called jurisdiction stripping, where Congress could pass a democracy bill, and in the bill would say that the Supreme Court does not have the right to subject this bill to judicial review, or say something like, the court can only strike down this bill on a 7-2, supermajority vote, or something like that. Um, uh, there are pros and cons for jurisdiction stripping. We at Take Back the Court think that court expansion is the only solution that's consistent with American politics and practices, because the court's size has changed 6 times in American history, that would rebalance the court right away, and that would deliver a court that would allow the administration and Congress to restore democracy and address the crises we face now.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a lot of those, things that are being talked about, like the one you just mentioned, would be real just band-aids to what is, a much deeper cut than.
I mean, you could imagine. I mean, jurisdiction stripping doesn't have to be from one law to the next. Like, you could pass a law stripping the court of its right to have jurisdiction over a whole category of laws. So you could have jurisdiction stripping can be structural and patterned and not just ad hoc. But I mean, to Take Back the Court, we think that it's not a great idea, because it also, one thing that jurisdiction stripping could do is it could allow, devolve authority down to the appellate courts, which have also been stolen by the Republicans because they didn't allow Obama to nominate and fill any appellate seats, maybe one or two, effectively no appellate judges in the last 2 years of his presidency. And then Trump rushed to fill all those openings. And so, someone has to decide these issues. And if you strip the jurisdiction from the Supreme Court, it's not necessarily the case that the issue will be, decided in a fairer court.
Mm.